Lakeland Currents, your public affairs program for north central Minnesota. Closed captioning is made possible by Bemidji Regional Airport, serving the region with daily flights to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. More information available at bemidjiairport.org.
Welcome to Lakeland Currents. I'm your host, Todd Haugen. Our show is about firefighting. We have a couple of prominent firefighters from our area to join us for Lakeland Currents today. We have the fire chief from Bemidji, Justin Sherwood, with us, and from the Minnesota DNR, Ben Lang. He's a forester and also is very much into firefighting. Welcome to Lakeland Currents, you gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
We've had this conversation several times before, but spring is the time that we get maybe especially concerned about fire, especially when we talk about fires outside, like wildfire. Why is that? Why is it such a concern, especially in the spring?
So this time of year, the snow is melting and people are getting out enjoying the weather. And all of the fuels from last summer and fall have died, and they've cured out in the cold weather and the dry conditions, and so they're very susceptible for fires, and just the ability for them to catch on fire increases until they come back to life and green up in the summertime.
Ben, it's especially concerning this year, isn't it? Because as we record this show, it's a few weeks before people will be seeing it in April, but this winter we didn't get the snow to pack down all of that vegetative matter, right?
Yeah, correct. We are in an El Nino this year, and for this region of the country, that usually means a warm, dry winter, and so we are way down on our snowpack this year, almost non-existent, and we are way above average for temperatures most of the winter, and so those two things kind of combined, and so we have fuels that are receptive to fires, ready right now as we speak, and will continue until things green up in late May, early June.
Mm-hmm. How do these wildfires start generally?
So there's a whole host of reasons that they start. Some of them are natural, lightning that'll happen later in the season, but 80 to 90% of fires in Minnesota are human caused. So they start from campfires, ash debris from boilers, maple syrup, people that have burned piles in the wintertime that still are holding over some heat, and on a warm, windy day, they escape, campfires, and they can even be, mechanical, faulty brakes, exhausts, just a muffler in some tall grass with an ATV or UTV. Those can all start fires this time of year.
It seems like we have fewer smokers today, but it used to be I would often see, burning cigarettes fly out car windows.
Yes, and you're right, there are few smokers, but those on really dry days, those can start fires too. Somebody drops an ember in a tall patch of grass, and if it's 25% relative humidity or less, there's a good chance that will start a fire.
Mm-hmm. Justin, are firefighters with the Bemidji Fire Department fighting wildfires very often?
Yeah, so Bemidji Fire protects an area of 522 square miles, and any time a fire is reported in our area, we're responding, structure or otherwise. And so, a majority of the fires that Ben and his team are responding to, we are also as well. So we work really close this time of year and throw as much resources as we can to help extinguish those things.
So again, you're not just talking about the city limits of the city of Bemidji.
Correct, yeah. So like I said, we cover what we say is 18 LGUs, 15 townships and 3 cities. And for reference, we go, Bemidji Fire will protect area up to 10 Strike, Minnesota, almost all the way down to Itasca State Park, over to Solway, and then the other direction near Cass Lake. So we have a very, very large area.
Is a topic maybe for another day, but that's one of the reasons that this fire association has been a discussion, right? Because that's going to cost a lot of money.
Yeah, firefighting isn't cheap, but as we educate people in our community and try to do a better job of it, it's an insurance policy, and you get what you pay for. So we always say, do you have an adequate amount of coverage? If not, how do we make those changes? And we invest in our community through resources, staffing, training, education, and so forth. And unfortunately, all that stuff comes at a cost.
And townships within your protection area contribute, don't they?
Yes, and it's based off of property value, but yes, every single LGU, all 18 LGUs contribute to our budget.
Okay. So do you see very many wildfires? That is kind of the big concern at this time of year.
Yeah.
Do you work with that very often?
Again, only in the spring and in fall time. Again, anytime that they're responding to a fire, we too are also providing resources. So yeah, we have our high points, definitely. We're very concerned as well this time of year, as we'll see a definite uptick in wildland fires. And our primary response purpose is for the structure protection side. So Minnesota DNR does the wildland, open land, forest stuff, and then we respond to provide structure protection. If and when we provide the adequate amount of protection, then we will leave those posts and head into the interface with our friends and work very, very closely with them.
Normally at this time of year, we see burning restrictions at some point, and occasionally we might see a burning ban. That's a lot more rare, it seems. What's the difference between a burning ban and burning restrictions?
So burning restrictions go on, we have our spring burning restrictions every year for the last 18, 20 years, and it's just a set time where we go, the fire danger is high, the potential is high, and so we're just going to kind of limit what you can burn. We still do allow variance permits for agricultural reasons or construction reasons, so we do have those variance permits available. A burning, or the other time we might have a restriction is if we are in a red flag warning or a fire critical warning where the weather is just so that we just want to limit that risk as much as we can. A burning ban is a little bit different. That takes a commissioner's order to facilitate, and that's when we do not allow any outdoor burning at all. So we'll shut down campfires, burning permits, everything, almost everything. It's very specific and it's very rare. It's only happened twice since the mid 70s, back in 76, and then in 2021 we put a burning ban on at that time too. But we always hear the misconception, oh, the DNR put on a burning ban, and that's not the case. It's a restriction. We're still allowing campfires and maple syrup boiling and stuff like that. It's just we're not allowing the backyard debris burning to be done for a few weeks.
But people do need to be especially careful even with those types of limited fire use.
Yeah, I mean, if you're enjoying the weather and you're having a campfire in your backyard, make sure that campfire is put out before you go to bed. Make sure that you're checking your ashes from your maple syrup boiler or your outdoor wood boiler that you're using for heating, and if you're dumping them in the corner of your garden, make sure that there's no grass around them and those ashes are good and cold, mixed with water and stirred up. So
I often wonder when people see that red flag warning attached to a weather forecast, I have to wonder if everybody really knows what that is.
I often wonder that too, and I think that comes back to our positions with anything. Education is key. We know in today's environment, especially with adults, when we're asked if we understand something, most of us will say yes because we're maybe ashamed or unsure. And so yeah, it's our job to continue to educate the public regardless of that. It's no different than reminding someone of the speed limit, for instance. So yes, we must do a much better job of educating all the time.
Ben, we were talking a little bit before we went on the air. The DNR sometimes does a controlled burn. I'm not sure what term the DNR uses for it. But why do you do that? And isn't that dangerous too?
Yeah, so we call them prescribed burns, and there is always a little bit of danger whenever you introduce fire onto the landscape. But the DNR uses prescribed burn as a tool for silviculture to regenerate trees and keep the forest moving and progressing and keeping a healthy forest. So we don't do a lot of them statewide, but we try, every forestry area tries to do a handful of them each year for a whole host of reasons, but it's for prepping the ground for seed so we can get young new seedlings established naturally.
Because 100 years ago or so, nature would have burned these areas on a regular basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Fire was very common on the landscape, 100, 150 years ago. I'd say, a lot of, especially our pine ground, burned every 5 to 10 years, and there was just continuous fire kind of cleaning things up, rejuvenating the ground, keeping that shrub layer kind of low and and in check. And so over the last 100 years, we've really done a good job of suppressing those fires. And a lot of fuels and a lot of competition have built up in our forest over the years. And so we're trying to, kind of mimic that natural landscape as best we can. We'll never do it completely because we have to be able to keep things in check and kind of keep things in the box, as we call it, so it doesn't go wild on us. But just trying to having a few areas where we restore that natural process as close as we can.
Many of us have a little bit of land, and some folks have a lot of land a lot of bit of land that has fuels that have built up, as you mentioned, Ben. I mean, I guess it's maybe fairly obvious, but what should people do about that when you have a lot of brush and dead branches and things that have built up in your property?
I'm going to shoot to you on that because I'm a structure guy.
So there's a couple different things you can do. I mean, if it's not a large area, if it's your backyard, you can always pick up that debris. You can haul it to a place where they take that and they turn it into mulch. That would probably be the number one thing that we'd say. You can burn it in a pile when safe conditions. If you have a larger tract of land, I would highly suggest reaching out to Minnesota DNR and talking to our private forester, and they'll set you up with a plan. What your goals are for your forest, and you can do a little bit of timber management. The goal is to manage the land and maybe remove some of those over mature trees, kind of reset that forest back into a healthy environment.
And to structures, Justin, I mean, people can do things to try to safeguard their home and buildings from fires that might approach their property.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Earlier in the show, you mentioned about the dangers of wildfire and why we're so aggressive in attacking those fires. And it is indeed because as our population grows in this area, we're running out of space in the city, if you will, to place structures. So now a lot of people are placing structures out in the forests. And when we do that, there's a number of things that we stress people to think about in cooperation with our DNR partners. Is you must maintain, a driveway, for instance, that large structure fire trucks can get into. In addition, we want to ensure that the landscape is far enough away from the house that'll give you a buffer. So there's a lot of good programs that the DNR has to help you with that. But from the structure side, we urge people, to have asphalt shingles, for instance, or make sure that pine trees and other debris are far enough away from the structure. So if a fire does burn up to that space, your green grass is like a fire break. In addition, properly maintain your yard, keep it trimmed. If you're able to, sprinkler your lawn, those types of things. But one of the biggest things that we're concerned about is access. We're very aggressive in our area, and we're fortunate enough to have full-time firefighters on staff, so we're able to get to your location quite quickly. However, if we're unable to access your property, that becomes very, very challenging.
Sure. So if your trees in your yard have started to lean over that direction, they change, of course, over time.
Correct. Yeah. If you start to see shrubbery or trees encroaching on your structure, let's talk to someone. Talk to someone in the DNR Forestry Division, or call a professional landscaper, and let's get those things removed. And we can work with them. I know Ben and his team can work with them. And again, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of programs out there that people can make access to help them in fire planning. And I think is it called Firewise?
It's called Firewise, so
Yeah.
yes. And there's lots of grants and opportunities. We can have people come out and do an assessment of your house, and they'll say, you need 30, 40 feet of defensible space around your house, no shrubs, no trees. You've stacked your firewood right up against your house. That's probably not the best idea. If a fire comes, it usually shoots a lot of embers, and they can get into that firewood, and now you've got a heat source right on the edge of your house. It talks about ingress, and egress, and that's huge. For even us getting in, we have some bigger equipment, and if trees are leaning over your driveway, or you've allowed the trees and the brush to come right up to it, and if we don't have the space, then we can't come down and help. So.
You talked about egress, and not only for the occupants of the structure, but also for us.
Yes.
And I know one of the things that the DNR always stresses is having an egress plan. And so in large wildland fires, we'll actually try to back our vehicles in so we can quickly escape. So if we don't have a way to access or do that, that may hamper our response.
Sure. You mentioned asphalt shingles. Are those are desirable over what, maybe cedar shakes or something? Is that what we're
I was making reference to that. Instead of like a wood shake, we all love the look of wood shakes, right? They're natural. However, they too dry out, and if we don't properly maintain them, they become another a source of ignition.
Right.
And so asphalt shingles would be preferred way to go because they are affordable. However, steel is also ideal. But very, very costly.
Steel and a tile roof is very uncommon in this area, but that's probably a pretty fireproof roof, I would think.
Yeah, correct. The other thing is regardless of the roof type, some of us have hills and valleys in our structures, and we need to maintain those areas too. So getting the pine debris, tree debris off of there annually. So that's important.
Because I see sparks. I mean, usually from our chimney, well, we do have a fireplace. I don't see sparks come out of there very often, but I always think, well, sparks could come out of there if you're burning pine needles or something for whatever reason, a pine branch. Yeah. And if it lands on those asphalt shingles, I mean, I know they burn, but they're probably somewhat resistant to burning.
Right, yeah. I don't think the asphalt shingle itself will ignite from an ember. It's the debris on the shingle or in those valleys that we would be concerned about.
Right. So then on to more about structures, Justin, for people that just general fire danger, and it's a danger year-round. People need to keep up their smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, right?
Yep, it's a year-long effort. Smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors are a very inexpensive tool that provide around-the-clock safety. And speaking specifically about smoke detectors alert us to a fire. And like when we teach the young people in our community, smoke detectors are most important at night when we sleep. When we sleep, our noses also take a break, if you will. We're unable to smell smoke, and those detectors act as a smelling device. If I'm trying to be as elementary as I can, a smelling device that alerts the occupant, grabs their ear to a danger, and gives them enough time to escape to a safe place. So, we stress people to test their detectors monthly, change their batteries every time change, or as needed. And so, maintenance of those inexpensive tools pay dividends in the long run.
I've seen those new detectors now that have like a 10-year battery in them, and you don't ever change it, you just have to change the whole thing?
Correct, yeah. It's becoming very common in having those lithium-ion batteries. They're actually sealed in the detector, so people can't remove the battery for whatever reason, and they stay in the battery for the life of the detector. So while we don't have to change the battery, we still must test them because it's a human-made device, and they do have faults.
And one of the benefits of that new way of doing smoke detectors is that detectors don't last forever. If you've been putting new batteries in your detector and it's like 25 years old, it might not be effective anymore.
Correct. We stress that detectors be changed out at a maximum of every 10 years. So, or if they fail. And you can always tell that a detector is old by the color of it. If it's not that bright white, it's time to go.
Right. So keep those up to date, keep monitoring.
Yeah, and one other thing, and I always will push it, they need to be in the areas that we sleep. Okay, so common areas like hallways and bedrooms. We don't need them in living rooms or kitchens, because when we're in those spaces, for the most part, we're up, we're alert, we're conscious. Right. But we want those in those sleeping areas.
But speaking of kitchens, those are the most dangerous fire area in most homes, aren't they?
Correct. Like, Ben made reference to the most common way that a wildfire starts. Structure fires, or at least our responses in Bemidji and the state of Minnesota, is caused by cooking. So the number one cause of fires in Minnesota is cooking.
Ben, back outdoors again. I see people that have piles of branches that build up, and they pile them for sometimes years, and you can have a huge pile of branches, and maybe they mean to burn them every winter when there's snow, but oftentimes they don't get around to it, or they think, well, the rabbits are living in there, I don't want to deprive them of their home. But I always think, boy, if that thing starts on fire, it's going to be a heck of a fire.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're condensing a fuel source into one location, and if something happens, that we call it a jackpot, is when you get a buildup like that. And so that's definitely a concern. And probably the other concern is you pile up that pile and you let it sit for 5-6 years. It's rotten in the middle, and now it does, and damp, and it doesn't burn as well. And so you don't get a nice clean burn. And so you have fuels that are partially burnt. They're probably still holding heat, and you don't even realize it, and then you go off to work and you get a warm, windy day, and it gets the right wind, and you start getting air and oxygen in there, and it'll come back to life when you're not there and could escape. And so, yeah, if you're going to burn a pile, do it, not immediately after the branches are on the ground, because they're usually still green and they don't burn well either, but within a year or two at the most. If it's been longer than that, you might want to start thinking about another way to remove that pile, because it'll get punky on you and not burn as well.
And when you do burn it, it would be a good idea to take the hose and really soak it after it's all done, right? To be sure it's all the way out?
Absolutely. If it's close enough to your house and you can get a hose to reach it, I mean, obviously that's the best way. I know a lot of times the piles are way back, behind the house. And that's where we promote kind of that winter burnings, because you have snow around. As the pile cooks down and becomes embers and looks like it's out, you can mix that snow right in there with the pile and stir it all up, get it all exposed, and make sure that you're checking and all the cold, it's cold everywhere.
Because even in your wood stove or fireplace, if you use something like that, you know that those coals, they keep burning for several days after you've had that last fire.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on fires where they lit the pile mid to late November, and in April it came back to life and started up. So they'll sit there for 4, 5, 6 months sometimes and just kind of lay low, but they're not out. They're just kind of sitting there, chunking along and still alive, and they can come out at any time. So.
So if they do that and a fire starts somewhere around your property and you think that's not a controlled fire, there's nobody around here, so that's burning, it's not supposed to be. Yeah. Should a person call the fire department first or try to put it out first, or what should you do?
Well, we both would say call 911.
Yes, absolutely.
Our county dispatchers will dispatch both resources at the same time. We don't want... If you want to put out a fire, you should have thought about that prior to lighting. Ben made reference to it, you made reference to it about planning, pre-planning. Have that hose out there, have heavy equipment, have a plan in case. But the minute that a fire starts, it's usually beyond our control, the individual's control. So we want to call 911. Early notification is absolutely key. Absolutely key.
It's only happened to me once, but it was my neighbor's yard, and he evidently had dumped some ashes that still had live coals, and a little fire started, and I saw it was burning, and I knew it wasn't supposed to be, and all these thoughts went through my mind pretty quickly. I thought, well, I need to put that out, but I need to report it. I don't want to get him in trouble. I mean, I don't know what this might cost him to have firefighters come out here and fight this, but the biggest concern is that fire getting out of control. So I made the call. I don't always do the right thing, but I think I did that time.
And you did make the call. And to Justin's reference, if you call early and you keep it small, if there is a bill or a citation issued because of that, chances are, because if you called early, it'll be smaller and it'll be less significant. So, when in doubt, call, and jump on that fire early to keep it in check as much as you can.
Right. If there can be a significant cost, though, if a firefighting effort is necessary for a fire that you let get away.
Absolutely, especially during those times of critical fire weather, like Ben referenced earlier in the show. We put out a ton of messages about no burning, please don't burn during the day, get a permit, so on and so forth. If someone steps outside of those recommendations and a fire gets away from them, it can be very costly, not only for structure resources, but for DNR resources and the possibility of air resources. So the homeowner becomes responsible.
Your burning permit will prescribe that if it's okay to, if you're able to get a burning permit, it'll say that you should burn after sundown or late in the day. And part of that is that the wind typically goes down at that time of day, right?
Yep. So right now it's 6 p.m. and after. And so the thought process behind that is that, as you get closer to 6 p.m., the sun's going down, it's getting cooler, the wind is going down, like you said. The humidities are usually going up at that point as well. So we have a reference, we call it our peak burning hours are usually between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. And that's when fires typically happen the most. That's when they're the most active and when they're burning the most frequently. And so we try to, like I said, limit people and that risk exposure to them. And so we say don't light after 6 p.m. And I know there are people that come in and go, well, I want to burn all day because that's when I'm home and it gets dark out. But we really do that as risk mitigation to kind of keep things as controlled as best we can. And so we're trying to look out for everybody on that one.
But people should still be aware of the forecast because, a cold front that comes through at midnight could kick that wind up pretty significantly.
Yeah, absolutely. You should be looking, at least the next day or maybe 2 or 3 days out after you burn a pile. Because, we do get this time of year especially, we'll have fronts that come through that are very dry, and that humidity might not recover at night. And so it'll stay down in the 40 to 50% range, which typically it goes up to 90 to 100%, and that's when you get the dew on the ground. And so, if you light your pile at 6 o'clock thinking that, it's going to calm down and it's just going to slowly go out, the winds might stay up or the humidity might not come up, and all of a sudden at 10 o'clock at night it becomes active again.
Gentlemen, we have less than a minute left of our show. Final words before we wrap up, Justin?
Speaking specifically about wildfire in burning, I think it's important for me to continue to educate our public that burning permits are always required within the city limits. And it isn't necessarily because of the dangers, but it's to also give Bemidji Fire an idea where a prescribed or planned burn is occurring. Within the city limits, we're tightly packed here. And so we like permits so we know what's going on, and so if we get a complaint, we know exactly where we're going. I will always say use common sense in everything you do, but specifically this time of year with wildfire.
Yeah. And I guess I just wanted to reiterate, use common sense, go out, enjoy the outdoors. That's what we want you to do. Just have a little idea of what the weather conditions are and those potentials, and stay safe out there.
Ben Lang, Justin Sherwood, thanks for joining us for Lakeland Currents.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and thanks for your support of Lakeland PBS.